Write a program that divides our value by the length of our string and prints the result. If a zero division error occurs, add 10 to the length of our string. If that still generates an error, print an error still occurred. If any other type of error occurs, print some other error occurred. If no errors are encountered, print no errors found. Print I'm finished when the program is finished running. You should remember to use error handling techniques, not conditionals. This problem will focus on using error handling within our programs. We can use error handling techniques to prevent our program from crashing if an error is encountered. In this problem, we are going to try and divide our value by the length of our string and print the result. We have our variables defined. Our value is equal to 9 and our string is equal to my CS homework is due tonight. First, let's create a variable that contains the number of characters in our string. We can call it characters. So characters is going to be equal to the length of our string. Let's go ahead and make that a float. The first step in error handling is to create a try block. The try block will mark off some code in which an error could possibly arise. What code would go underneath the try block? Under the try block, we would want to include code that we want the computer to try to run. In this case, we want the computer to try to divide our value by characters. So we will want to print our value divided by characters. We know that this particular set of numbers will not generate an error because we can easily divide 9 by 30. However, we want this code to not crash regardless of the values of our value in characters. So we must generate the catch or except block in order to account for an instance in which the try block would generate an error. This block will contain the code that the computer should run if an expected error were to occur. We can designate specific code to run based on the type of error that was encountered as well. The next part of the problem is asking us to add 10 to the length of the string if specifically a zero division error was encountered. For example, this would occur if our string were an empty string. We can use except zero division error to create the except block. This except block will be specific code that is run if and only if the error that was encountered is related to a divide by zero error. This block will not catch any other type of error. The directions tell us that we should add 10 to the length of our string if this type of error occurs, and then try to divide it again. However, we may still run into errors even after doing this. We don't want the program to crash if this happens, so we'll want to print an error occurred instead. So, based on this information, what code should go underneath the catch block? We would want to use a nested try-catch block under the first catch block in order to make sure that our program can run the code and not crash. The first thing that we want to do is to try adding 10 to the length of our string. Because characters is equal to the length of our string, we can just add 10 to characters. Now we can add the line of code to print our value divided by characters. However, this could still cause an error, so we still have to add the except block in order to have some code that will run in the event that this try block fails. So under except, we can add print an error occurred. Now, this finishes out the except block, but we're still not completely finished. Our first except block is meant to catch divide by zero related errors only. Any other error will still remain uncaught, and if encountered, the program would fail. What's the next piece of code that we should add to this program, and where would it go? We must add another except block that will catch all other errors. For example, it could catch a name error or a value error. We can group all these errors together in this program and have them generate the same output. The except block should go under the same indentation as the try block on line 13 and the catch block on line 15. The directions tell us that we should print some other error if any other error occurs that is not a zero division error. So we can add this line of code to the program. We're still not quite done yet. The directions tell us that if no errors are encountered, we should print no errors found. What code would allow us to do this? We would have to include an else block. The else block runs if no errors are encountered within the try block. The program would skip over the except blocks and just do whatever the else block says to do. So in this case, we would print no errors occurred. No errors found, sorry. The last thing we want to do is print I'm finished once the program is finished running. We would put this code underneath a finally block. It's good to use a finally block because we know it will run whether or not an error was encountered in the first place. When this code runs with these particular values given to the variables, the code prints the following, which is expected. We have 0.3 because we divided 9 by 30 in the try block up here. And because that was successful and did not run into any errors, we skipped over both of the except blocks and we went straight to the else block. And so that went ahead and printed no errors found. The finally block ran regardless of whether or not an error occurred, so it printed I'm finished. Now, if the string were empty instead, we would get a different output. If we run this code, we now have 0.9 and then I'm finished. This occurs because we have to add 10 to the length of our string. This first try block up here encountered an error because we had a zero division error. So we skip down to this except block for the zero division error and we try to add 10 to the length of our string and then divide it by characters. This was successful, and so we print 0.9, skip over the rest of the code because we don't need it, and we skip down to the finally block to print I'm finished. Now let's say, for example, we use the word my value here instead of our value. Well, now we have a name error because this variable does not exist. So we'd skip down to the second except block. The first one is designated only for zero division errors. The second one will catch the name error and print some other error occurred. The finally block will still run regardless of whether or not there was an error, and there was, but it will still print I'm finished.